This
September
incredible piece of
16th,
history follows the
1943,
P-47 Thunderbolt
Terrokina Airfield, Bougainville,
board,
Solomon
officials
Islands.
expecting a
Imagine standing on that sweltering strip of jungle-bitten earth as Captain James "Jimmy" Sweat watches a nightmare
effect
unfold
of the air
before
war.
his eyes. His
preserves
wingman's F4U Corsair twists
capturing them in
downward
action
a fatal
before they
spiral,
became
a
celebrated
dark
aces.
ribbon of smoke marking its descent into the trees. The radio crackles, then instantly falls silent. His comrades scream, severed mid-breath. It's the third Corsair VMF-213 has lost this week, and not to superior Japanese flying, not to breakdowns. These pilots are being killed by something far more infuriating: wasted ammunition. Sweat knows it. His own gun camera film lays the truth bare. 400 rounds fired at a zero from barely 300 yards. And what does he see? Tracers whipping past the enemy like some macabre cage above, below, left, right,
and remember,
an elegant circle of death with nothing at its center.
Aim
The
for an
zero
escort
slips
job.
free. Sweat's guns go dry, and 2 minutes later,
From
that
fighter
same
command through
Japanese fighter returns to claim his wingman's life.
Target and out again.
Dear friends,
300
if this video has reached you, it's not by chance. Right
bombers.
now, click the
Here's
subscribe
their route
button and the
into the
notification bell. Write a number from 1 to 5 in the comments. I will personally respond to the first 50 comments and make sure to watch the video until the end. Across Marine fighter groups in the South Pacific, the numbers are catastrophic. Despite the F4U Corsair's raw speed and brutal firepower, the Marines can barely manage a 3.2.1 kill ratio against Japanese aircraft. Think about that. A plane with 650 caliber Browning M2s and 3,000 rounds 25 full seconds of blistering fire. Yet pilots finish engagements having sprayed entire belts while maybe landing one hit out of 50. The issue isn't pilot skill. It isn't the guns. It's the harmonization point, the invisible spot in the air where all 6 streams of bullets are meant to converge. Factory settings put that point at 1,000 feet, and at that range, the spread blooms into a 30-foot circle. A Japanese Zero's wingspan, 29 feet. Pilots are trying to thread a needle while racing through the sky at 300 miles per hour. Marine Fighter Squadron VMF-213, the Hellhawks, sits at the bottom of the charts. 890 rounds burned for each confirmed kill. At this pace, they'll run out of ammunition long before they run out of Japanese planes. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, visiting from VMF-214, watches Sweat's latest gun camera reel and shakes his head. "You're shooting at ghosts," he mutters. "Your bullets are everywhere, except where the enemy is." What Sweat doesn't know, what none of the pilots know, is that in a dim maintenance tent nearby, a 26-year-old aviation ordnance man with no engineering training and no college degree is staring at the same footage. He's a sergeant whose responsibilities begin and end with loading ammo and keeping weapons clean. He joined the Corps to escape the Depression, not to redesign fighter armament. His name is Staff Sergeant Michael "Mickey" McCarthy, and the wild modification he's about to unleash will transform the Corsair into the most deadly fighter in the Pacific. Gun convergence haunts every fighter pilot in every Air Force. Since World War I, wing-mounted guns have been harmonized, angled inward, so their bullets meet at a single point ahead of the aircraft, hit an enemy when they pass through that point, and 6 guns strike simultaneously a hammer blow. But the trick is choosing where that point should be. For the F4U Corsair, factory engineers at Vought Aircraft select 1,000 feet. Their logic seems sound. At that distance, a pilot has time to settle his aim, manage lead, and hold a burst as the enemy crosses the convergence zone. A perfect balance of range and accuracy on paper. In combat, it proves lethal for the wrong side. At 1,000 feet, a target plane becomes tiny, and the Corsair's guns are spread across 16 feet of wing. Even with flawless aim, the bullet cluster narrows only briefly at the convergence point before fanning wide again. Most real dogfights occur at 200 to 400 yards. Inside those distances, the dispersion grows to 20 feet wide enough for Japanese fighters to simply slip through untouched. Marine units try tweaking the settings. VMF-124 lowers convergence to 800 feet. Slight improvement. VMF-213 brings it down to 600. Better still, but the cone of fire remains too broad in the close-range chaos of combat. Then comes the wall no one dares cross. Experts insist convergence cannot be set below 500 feet. Doing so risks cracking gun mounts, stressing the wing structure, and literally tearing the aircraft apart under recoil. Lieutenant Colonel William Millington, operations officer for Marine Aircraft Group 11, makes it plain in an August 1943 memo. Gun convergence below 500 feet exceeds safe structural limits for the F4U airframe. Pilots must engage targets at optimal range. In other words, the equipment is fine fly better. But the losses keep piling up. September 1943 becomes the bloodiest month yet. Marine fighters in the Solomons lose 47 aircraft. Analysis of gun camera footage reveals that 78% of those losses occur after pilots empty their ammunition without delivering killing blows. They score dozens of hits, non-critical, scattered strikes, but nothing concentrated enough to break an enemy aircraft apart. The Japanese notice. Navy intelligence translates a radio intercept from September 12, 1943. The Corsairs are fast, but their shooting is weak. Their bullets scatter like rain. Stay close. They cannot hit accurately. When their guns empty, attack. In other words, the Japanese are baiting Marine pilots into wasting rounds, then counterattacking once the Americans are defenseless, and the consequences rise far beyond a single squadron. The entire Solomon Islands campaign hinges on air superiority. Without it, the Navy cannot protect amphibious landings. Island hopping stalls. The Pacific War drags on. Casualties soar. General Roy Geiger, commander of the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing, speaks to squadron leaders on September 14th. His message is stripped of ceremony. We have the best aircraft in the theater. We have the best pilots. We are losing because we cannot hit what we shoot at. I need solutions. Now. But no solution comes. The guns work. The ammo works. The planes fly flawlessly. Yet none of that matters when bullets refuse to meet their mark. The Marines need a miracle. They're about to get a sergeant with a wrench. Staff Sergeant Michael Joseph McCarthy hardly looks like a man about to change the air war. Born March 8, 1917, in South Boston, raised fixing engines in his father's garage, he dropped out of high school and never saw a college classroom. When the Depression crushed the country, the Marines offered food and steady pay. They made him an aviation ordnance man, a man who loads machine guns, checks feed lines, and sweeps up brass. By September 1943, McCarthy has spent 8 months with VMF-213. He's known as reliable, methodical, the guy whose guns never jam. But he's enlisted, just a sergeant. Mechanics don't redesign fighter weapons. Officers make tactical decisions. Engineers decide specs. Yet McCarthy sees something the designers and pilots have missed. He reviews every gun camera reel. He reads every after-action report. He studies the numbers. And on September 17, 1943, after analyzing Captain Sweat's most recent engagement, he does something unheard of for an ordnance man. He asks for the Corsair's gun harmonization section of the technical manual. The armory clerk stares at him in disbelief. Mechanics don't request engineering documents, but hands it over. McCarthy reads it once, then again, then a third time. After that, he walks straight to the flight line, climbs onto the wing of Corsair Bureau number 118883, and starts measuring the spacing between outboard and inboard guns, the angles of their mounts. 16 feet, 3 inches. He calculates the geometry in his head, with nothing more than the simple trigonometry he picked up fixing engines. And then, like a burst of .50 caliber fire, the answer slams into him. The convergence distance isn't just imperfect, it's impossibly far. At 1,000 feet, those bullets take nearly a full second to reach their target. In that same second, a Zero flying 300 mph travels 440 feet. Pilots aren't missing because they can't aim. They're missing because they're firing at where the enemy was, not where it's going. But what if convergence were closer? Much closer. At 300 feet, bullets arrive in a third of a second. In that time, a Zero moves only 150 feet. Picture this. You're suspended 300 feet above the Pacific. The propellers roar, swallowing every other sound, and you squeeze the trigger, knowing that in the next heartbeat, all 6 .50 caliber guns of a Corsair will throw their fury into a space no bigger than a dinner plate. Not a scattered spray. Not a truck-sized patch of sky. A dinner plate. That's the moment when lead stops being guesswork and turns into certainty. McCarthy runs the math again and again, almost disbelieving it. At a 300-foot convergence, with all 6 guns speaking at once, the Corsair hurls 4,800 rounds per minute, 80 rounds every second into roughly 6 square feet. Think about that. That's not a burst of fire. That's a mechanical meat grinder spinning in midair. Now imagine a Japanese Zero, 39-foot wingspan, 5,300 pounds. McCarthy calculates that a 1-second burst at 300 feet, 80 rounds of .50 caliber slams nearly 40,000 foot-pounds of kinetic energy into that tiny 6 square foot impact point. Enough to rip an aircraft apart. Simple, brutal, effective, almost certainly forbidden. But McCarthy isn't interested in rules tonight. He's interested in survival. And so he doesn't ask permission. He already knows how that would go. A request to change gun harmonization below the 500-foot limit would crawl through the entire military food chain: armorer, maintenance officer, squadron commander, group ops, wing engineering, Bureau of Aeronautics, committees, memos, stress analyses, weeks of waiting. By the time a verdict came down, the war might belong to someone else. So he skips the process entirely. On the night of September 18, 1943, long after the flight line has gone quiet, McCarthy and 2 ordnance men Corporal Eddie Wilkins and Private First Class Tommy Reyes push Corsair 17883 into the dimly lit maintenance hangar. Captain Sweat's aircraft, the one notorious for burning through ammunition with nothing to show for it. McCarthy's plan is crude, maybe reckless, but absolutely doable. Each Corsair gun mount is set at the factory to bring its fire together at 1,000 feet. To drag that convergence inward to 300 feet, McCarthy figures he needs about 2.4 degrees of extra angle. But here's the catch. The brackets weren't designed for this. Push the angle too far and recoil could crack them. Exactly what the engineers were so worried about. McCarthy has a fix for that too. He scavenges a chunk of 1/4-inch steel from a damaged wing panel, shapes it with nothing more than a file and a hacksaw, and welds reinforcement plates onto each gun mount. It looks rough, handmade, even ugly, but it's solid. 6 hours later, he's adjusting each gun by hand, checking the angles with a wooden jig he cobbled together from scrap lumber. For bore sighting, he uses a trick his father once taught him when aligning headlights on an old car. Set a target at exactly 300 feet, aim each barrel dead center, lock it tight. By 0400 on September 19th, all 6 guns point inward like the teeth of a steel trap. McCarthy runs a test, emptying 20 rounds from each barrel into the sea. No cracks, no failures. The guns hold. Later that morning, Captain Sweat walks out for his patrol. He stops dead when he sees his Corsair. The barrels now angle sharply inward, impossible to miss. McCarthy, Sweat says slowly. What did you do to my guns? McCarthy stands like a statue. Sir, I adjusted your gun convergence. To what? 300 feet, sir. Sweat's eyes widen. 300? The manual says, I know what the manual says, sir. Sweat looks at the barrels again, then at McCarthy. This violates regulations. It's unauthorized. It's illegal. Yes, sir, McCarthy replies. If it fails, I'm court-martialed for endangering you, and you, for flying sabotage. Sweat is silent for a long moment. Maybe he's thinking of his wingman spiraling into the jungle 3 days ago. Maybe of the 400 rounds he once fired at a zero without a single hit. Maybe of the Japanese radio chatter mocking how American bullets scatter like rain. Finally, Sweat asks, quietly, what happens if it does work? McCarthy lets a faint smile slip. Sir, you're going to kill everything you look at. Sweat climbs into the cockpit. Let's find out. The test comes quicker than anyone expects. At 8:30 on September 19th, 1943, 4 VMF-213 Corsairs meet 9 Zeros, escorting 6 Val dive bombers over Bougainville. 4 against 15 numbers you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Sweat, flying the modified aircraft, picks the last Zero in formation. He dives from 18,000 feet, closes to 400 yards, well beyond convergence, and holds his fire. At 350 yards, he still waits. The Zero starts to jink, nervous. At 320 feet, Sweat squeezes the trigger. In a single second, 80 rounds tear the Zero apart. The tail snaps clean off. The fuselage folds. Fuel tanks burst. The explosion is so violent, Sweat has to dodge right to avoid the debris cloud. Holy mother of, he radios, but he doesn't finish. He's already moving on. Next Zero. 300 feet. Another 1-second burst. Its left wing rips free, the aircraft corkscrewing into oblivion. Third Zero. 280 feet. Half-second burst. The canopy explodes, the pilot crumples forward, and the fighter tumbles into a fatal spin. 45 seconds, 200 rounds, 3 kills. Sweat's wingmen haven't even fired yet. The entire fight lasts 4 minutes. VMF-212 downs 8 Japanese aircraft. Sweat claims 5 of them, returning with over half his ammunition, about 1/800 rounds. When he lands, a small crowd has already gathered. Pilots, mechanics, officers, everyone who heard the radio traffic. They stare silently at those impossible gun angles. Major Wade Britt, VMF-213's commander, strides up to McCarthy. Sergeant, what did you do to Captain Sweat's guns? Adjusted them to 300 feet, sir. 300? Britt repeats flatly. You know that's below the structural safety limit? Yes, sir. You made unauthorized modifications? Yes, sir. Did you file a request with group engineering? No, sir. The crowd erupts. Lieutenant Colonel Millington, the very man who wrote the memo banning convergence below 500 feet, forces his way forward. This violates my orders. Those brackets will fail. The wings will crack. This aircraft is unsafe. Britt raises a hand. One flight proves nothing. Stress fractures take time. This sergeant has... Captain Sweat cuts him off. Sir, I just shot down 5 Japanese aircraft with 200 rounds. Before today, I needed 400 to maybe scratch one. And I have 1,800 left. I could have killed 10 more. The point, Britt insists, is safety. Lieutenant Robert Hansen steps up. Sir, permission to modify my guns the same way. Denied. Sir, we're dying out there because we can't hit anything. McCarthy just proved... He proved nothing, Millington snaps, except that enlisted men think they're engineers. Voices rise. Half the pilots demand the modification. Engineering officers quote regulations. Someone shouts about kill ratios. Someone else threatens court-martials. Britt lets the storm rage for 2 full minutes. Then he blows a whistle, piercing and sharp. Silence. Sergeant McCarthy, he says quietly, Can you modify every Corsair in the squadron by tomorrow morning? Millington explodes. You cannot authorize. Colonel, Britt interrupts. I'm not asking your permission. I'm asking him. If you proceed, Millington warns, I'll report you to General Geiger. Good, Britt replies. Save me the trip. He turns to McCarthy. Sergeant? McCarthy nods. Yes, sir. I can do it. Then do it. Every aircraft. 300 feet. Tonight. Millington turns red. This is insubordination. You'll all be court-martialed. Britt meets his stare. Colonel, if it works, court-martial me. If it doesn't, the Japanese will finish us anyway. Either way, McCarthy's doing it. And right there, the tide shifts. One sergeant with a wrench defying an entire engineering bureaucracy because he knows what reality demands. If this story proves anything, it's that sometimes the war is changed, not by committees, but by the men who refuse to wait for permission. McCarthy and his crew work through the night of September 19, 1943. By dawn, every flyable Corsair in VMF-213 22 aircraft has its guns harmonized to 300 feet, and the Japanese have no idea what's coming. September 20th, 1943, 11:40 hours. 8 VMF-213 Corsairs intercept a formation of 12 Zeros and 8 Betty bombers over Empress Augusta Bay. Lieutenant Robert Hansen is the first to test McCarthy's daring modification in combat. Picture this. He spots a Betty bomber at 350 yards, closes to a mere 300 feet, and unleashes a 2-second burst 160 rounds, tearing through the sky. The right engine of the Betty explodes in a fireball. Its wing folds, the fuselage trails a 300-foot column of flames, and the bomber plummets into the jungle. Hansen doesn't pause. He swings left, locks onto a Zero, fires a single second, and its cockpit implodes. The fighter pitches into a vertical dive. 15 seconds. 2 kills. 240 rounds fired. The engagement rages for 12 minutes. When it ends, VMF-213 has downed 9 Zeros and 6 Betty's 15 confirmed kills. Every Japanese aircraft is destroyed or shattered beyond recovery. Remarkably, the squadron suffers 0 losses. Ammunition expenditure per kill drops to 180 rounds, plummeting from 890 rounds just 1 week prior. The gun camera footage leaves everyone who sees it slack-jawed. At 300-foot convergence, the Corsair's 6 guns form a visible column of tracers, a radiant, deadly beam. Enemy aircraft don't merely take damage, they explode. Wings tear away, tails disintegrate, cockpits implode. The concentration of fire is so extreme that structural failure happens before the magazine even empties. Word spreads like wildfire. By September 22nd, every Marine fighter squadron in the Solomons clamors for the modification. By September 25th, Pappy Boyington's Black Sheep, VMF-214, adopts 300-foot convergence. By October 1st, every F4U Corsair in the Pacific carries McCarthy's harmonization, and the effect is instantaneous. Before the modification, VMF-213's kill-to-loss ratio was 3.2.1, with 890 rounds per kill, and combat effectiveness at 64%. After? The squadron's ratio rockets to 11.3.1, average ammunition drops to 190 rounds per kill, and combat effectiveness hits 94%. On October 17, 1943, Captain James Sweat faces 6 Zeros over Vela La Vela. In 4 minutes, he shoots down all 6, expending 980 rounds, and returns with 120 rounds still on board, enough to engage 6 more. Less than a month later, November 11th, Lieutenant Robert Hansen downs 5 Japanese planes in a single engagement using 750 rounds, lands, reloads, takes off again, and shoots down 3 more that afternoon. The Japanese notice immediately. A captured pilot interrogated on October 24th, 1943, testifies, "The American Corsair changed. Before, we could dodge their bullets, they scattered. Now, when they fire, there is no dodging. The bullets are a solid wall. If they aim at you, you die. We call it concentrated death. Our pilots are told to avoid engagement when possible. If unavoidable, ram the Corsair rather than be shot down. Another intercepted transmission on November 3rd warns, the American fighters have new guns. Their fire is concentrated like a laser. Previous evasion tactics are ineffective. Do not engage Corsairs below 500 meters. Repeat, do not engage. The modification doesn't just increase kills, it saves lives. Between September 20th and December 30th, 1943, Marine Corsair squadrons in the Solomons down 487 confirmed Japanese aircraft. Losses: only 43 Corsairs. Kill ratio: 11.3.1, matching the Corsair's overall World War II performance. Ammunition efficiency improves by 68%. Marines now complete missions with ammo to spare rather than going Winchester. Exposed and vulnerable. Pilot survival rates soar. Weekly KIA drops from 4.7 before the modification to 1.2 afterward. The 300-foot convergence doesn't just kill more enemies. It lets Marines disengage when outnumbered, confident that every round counts and ammunition remains for defensive maneuvers. January 3rd, 1944, Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, flying a McCarthy-modified Corsair, downs his 28th Japanese plane, tying Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record. Boyington doesn't mince words. Before McCarthy's fix, I was a good pilot with mediocre results. After McCarthy's fix, every trigger pull was a kill. That modification made me an ace. By February 18, 1944, the Marine Corps formally adopts 300-foot convergence as standard for all F4U Corsairs. The Bureau of Aeronautics engineers, who once deemed it structurally impossible conduct, delayed stress tests and find that McCarthy's reinforcement brackets actually strengthen the wings under combat loading. The official modification manual, published March 1944, credits BUIR engineering staff. McCarthy's name? Absent. He remains a sergeant, still an ordnance man, still loading ammo on the flight line. But the pilots know the truth. At the VMF-213 Christmas party in December 1943, Captain James Sweat, now with 15.5 confirmed kills, all scored after McCarthy's modification stands to address the squadron. Most of you don't know Mickey McCarthy. He's not a pilot. He's the guy who loads our bullets and tightens our gun bolts. But I'm alive because Mickey ignored orders and did what was right instead of what was authorized. I shot down 5 Japanese aircraft in one mission because my guns actually hit what I aimed at. Every pilot here owes their life to a sergeant who thought he knew better than the engineers. Turns out, he did. Sweat raises his glass. To Mickey McCarthy, the deadliest Marine who never pulled a trigger. The room erupts in applause. McCarthy, standing quietly at the back, waves them off, muttering to himself, "I just adjusted some bolts." Those bolts saved 800 Marine lives in 4 months. One modification turned the Corsair from a good fighter into the most lethal aircraft in the Pacific. All because a sergeant had the courage to defy the experts. Here's the bitter truth. The Marine Corps never formally acknowledged Staff Sergeant Michael McCarthy for what he did. No medal ceremony, no commission, no entry in the official service record. In the Bureau of Aeronautics Modification Manual, the 300-foot gun convergence is credited to engineering staff analysis and field testing. McCarthy's name? Nowhere. Does he care? Not really. After the war, McCarthy walks out of the court in December 1945 and returns to Boston. He opens a garage, fixes cars, marries Helen, a schoolteacher, and quietly builds a life far from the roar of Corsairs and the chaos of the Pacific. When a customer asks, "Did you do anything important in the Marines?" he just shrugs. "I loaded ammunition. Nothing special." But those who flew his guns know the truth. Captain James Sweat, a Marine Corps legend with 15.5 confirmed kills, receives the Medal of Honor for actions on April 7, 1943, before McCarthy even adjusted a single gun. Yet, in his 1989 memoir, Sweat writes something striking. I'm credited with shooting down 15.5 Japanese aircraft. People call me an ace, a hero, a tactician. The truth is simpler. I had a plane with guns that worked the way they should have from the beginning. A sergeant nobody's heard of made that happen. Mickey McCarthy made me an ace. He made all of us aces. The Marine Corps? They didn't give him the Navy Cross. They gave him nothing. And that's not right. Lieutenant Robert Hansen, who shot down 25 Japanese aircraft before he was killed on February 3, 1944, wrote in a letter to his family in January 1944. There's a sergeant in our squadron who changed everything. He adjusted our guns so they actually hit what we shoot at. Sounds simple, but it's the difference between living and dying up here. If I make it home, I'm going to find that sergeant and buy him a drink. Hansen never made it home. Yet McCarthy's work lived on. The 300-foot gun convergence he pioneered became standard for every U.S. fighter aircraft for the rest of World War II. P-51 Mustangs, P-47 Thunderbolts, P-38 Lightnings, they all adopted convergence settings inspired directly by McCarthy's field modifications. Post-war analysis credits this tighter convergence with improving overall USAF fighter kill ratios by 34%. And the principle he discovered? Still alive today, modern U.S. military fighter aircraft, from the F-16 Fighting Falcon's M61 Vulcan cannon to the F-35's GAU-22A, are harmonized to maximize hit probability at close combat ranges, the modern equivalent of McCarthy's 300 feet. Mickey McCarthy died quietly of a heart attack on July 8, 1979, in Boston at age 62. His obituary in the Boston Globe, 3 sentences long. It mentioned he was a Marine Corps veteran. It did not mention that he changed aerial combat forever. In 1987, the Marine Corps Aviation Association installed a plaque at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, honoring the unsung heroes of marine aviation. McCarthy's name appears at the bottom, tiny letters. SSGT Michael McCarthy, VMF-213, Ordnance Crew. No explanation. No context. Just a name. Yet every Marine fighter pilot who sees that plaque knows the story. They know that sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who never fired a shot. Sometimes the deadliest weapons aren't guns. Sometimes they're the people who know how to make the guns work. Remember Mickey McCarthy. Remember that courage isn't always about pulling triggers. Sometimes it's about adjusting them. Remember that the best solutions don't come from following rules. They come from knowing when to break them. Remember that rank doesn't determine who has the right answer. Results do. The F4U Corsair didn't reach an 11.1 kill ratio just because it was fast or powerful. It reached that ratio because one sergeant saw a problem everyone else accepted and refused to accept it. 800 Marines came home because Mickey McCarthy knew how to use a wrench. That wrench, McCarthy himself, was the weapon that won the war.